So the first article that I chose to read about that sounded interesting to me was the article by Nicholas Carr. It's titled "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" And it kind of made me think about how technology is so involved in our society today, and it sounded interesting. Kind of what the article is about. It talks about the differences between reading on the internet and reading printed text, such as a book, a newspaper. Um, and what it talked about was how it causes shorter attention spans, and how it just kind of talked about the advertisements and hyperlinks and just the wormholes of information that you can get in on the internet that kind of distracts you. It, it it leads to those shorter attention spans. As to if you're in a novel, then you can go pages in an hour without looking up, and there's nothing to distract you. Um, and from the article, it says Marion Wolf says we are not only what we read, but we are how we read, and that kind of made me think about it's not the subject of the text, but it's what you're reading it on and how you're reading it, and what's on the page. It also goes on to talk about how we skim more, and we want to read short descriptions or abstracts before diving into a full length novel, and that kind of goes back to the short attention spans. We want to know what we're getting into before we tackle a big text. um, I thought that this article was intended for the younger generation of people, such as us, college age people, rather than the older generation. But really, it can be intended for anyone who uses the internet. It applies to everybody who uses the internet, since the article mentions that even the adult brain is very plastic and still has the ability to reprogram itself on the fly, and altering the way it functions. so so it can apply to any people of any age. And I see these effects play out not only in myself but people around me. I realize that our attention spans are getting shorter, and the article also mentions power browsing, which again goes back to skimming, and rather than reading in depth, you just want to get a short glance of what a text may be about. And I personally connect with this. I know I do. It's very evident. And some of the evidence that he provides is some medical evidence that he mentions with doctors, and how they perform experiments to gather concrete evidence of how the internet changed their minds, and brings in evidence from even Socrates, who warns of reading and writing and how it will bring people to be relying on it, which to an extent is true, but it also brings knowledge and a wealth of information. So maybe it makes you think that we've exploited it in the wrong way, and the internet being the wrong way, since it's full of distractions and things that don't let us focus, and put our full attention towards what we're reading. And that goes back to how we're reading. Kind of the language that Nicholas Carr uses is, he uses a number of metaphors, comparing our brains and our thought processes to something that we can see and we can picture. In the text, he says, Once I was a scuba diver in the sea of words. Now I zip along the surface like a guy on a jet ski." So, scuba diver, you're down beneath the surface. You're seeing what the words truly mean, and now he zips along the surface like a guy on a jet ski. So he's just flying over the surface, and not seeing what's beneath. And he uses the metaphor of breadcrumbs of information, which is the small bits of information that we want to get rather than a big piece. And one of the questions I have from this article is, with the way that technology is improving and advancing today, will we even utilize printed books articles, newspapers, etc. in the future. And it could be 20 years from now, it could be 100 years from now, but will we have those newspapers and books being still printed, or will everything be online and be electronic and easily accessible to us? So it looks like it's kind of a direction that we're slowly moving in, but it's kind of scary to think about. And the second article that I read about was titled Take the F by Ian Fraser, and it didn't really interest me at first, but I didn't really know what it could have been about, so that it didn't sound appealing to me, and I really didn't know what I was getting into. But once I started reading it, um, it surprised me. I figured it would be maybe about grades or school, since it mentioned an F. I didn't really know, but I did not expect a description of Brooklyn, which is what it was about. And I think the main point of this story is just to explain the cultural diversity of Brooklyn and really just New York City in general, and where the title comes from. He talks about the F train, so he wants you to take the F, and he kind of just describes everything that he's seen on the train. He tells stories about that and just being in the city in general and what you may see on a daily basis. He goes on to say that he enjoys living there, and he's in a place that isn't a nowhere place, as he puts it. And he talks about his daughter and their trip to Montana. She's talking to a young boy there, and she tells him about a broken glass on the ground and good pizza. So that's just kind of a description of New York, and he goes through countless examples of diversity in the city, which is kind of what I feel like he's trying to get at through the whole story, and how they have such a diverse group of people, yet still have a reputation of being one group. He writes about saying things such as D's and does, and instead of these and those, and having good pizza, and these are kind of just seen as universal. But he wants to focus on the true diversity that's in the city rather than what people think of them. But other than this, I don't really know what his main thesis is. It's kind of confusing. He seems to kind of just be going on and on about diversity and what makes Brooklyn so different from like Ohio, where he mentioned he grew up. So maybe he's wanting us to understand something about how they have a reputation of being similar in nature, yet explaining how diverse they actually are, it kind of leaves it up in the air further than that. But his language, he's very vivid in the examples, and he does a good job of helping the reader truly visualize what he is explaining, so we can get a greater grasp on what he's using and what he's trying to say. He's very descriptive, and again, it makes us kind of picture what he's talking about and how diverse they truly are. And he could just say, there's a lot of different people here, and there's a lot of languages spoken, but he wants to be very descriptive and really help us imagine what goes on a daily basis. And one question I had from this article, which I kind of touched on earlier, was, I don't really know what his point may be in the article, other than kind of explaining diversity and cultural diversity in Brooklyn. So I feel like a lot of it was just kind of, for me, I saw what was on the surface, but I didn't really know what was beneath his writing, what was behind it. So that was kind of my question for that article. And if you read this and have an idea of what may be going on underneath his text, then that would be my question for you: is to just let me know that, because it was baffling me. So that's it.